Evil Shadows. Horror story. This story began with the death of my grandfather. The news came to me through my mother's phone call. I didn't know my grandfather at all. My only approach with him was when I was 6 years old, when my parents took me to their ranch for the first time. As soon as we arrived, he gave me a wide smile. But his eyes didn't reflect any expressiveness. I could say that it was strange. The whole family thought he was crazy because he said he heard women screaming all over the house every day, although my parents thought it was due to the deterioration of his mind because of his advanced age. Grandfather, after grandmother's death, dedicated his whole life to take care of that ranch, and it had been his last wish that one of his grandchildren would take over. For that, my mother called me. I had to go to the ranch together with my sisters and all my cousins because the lawyer was waiting for us there to decide who would be the heir. Not that I had much interest in keeping the ranch, but if it was grandfather's last will that at least I should be considered, I had to show up. The trip was excessively tiring. For starters, I lived in another state, at the other end of the country, and I had no money for a flight. Luckily, all those expenses were covered by grandfather's lawyer. After the flight, I still had a long road trip ahead of me. The worst of all was not the journey. It was that the cab driver who took me was one of those who like to make you talk while they have Arjona's music playing in the background. Finally, I arrived at the ranch. To enter the property, I had to do it riding a horse, since this was the only way to get there due to the bad condition of the road, full of mud and rocks, which made it quite impassable. After a brief look, I noticed that the land was quite large and that the house was smaller than I remembered. Upon setting foot inside the house, I was greeted by a musty mothball smell. I realized that the only one who had yet to arrive was me. I greeted everyone. It had been over 3 years since I had last seen most of them. We sat down with the lawyer, and he proceeded to read us the will. I summarized it. Someone had to take over the ranch. This included enough money to not have to work. Of course, there were conditions. The first was that the ranch could not be sold, and the person who took it had to stay on the property at least 10 out of the 12 months of the year. The first to say no were those with wives and children, as the nearest school was 3 hours away to begin with. The next to refuse was a cousin who has a YouTube channel where he talks about the struggle, and clearly he was not going to leave his channel to go live on a ranch. So we were down to 3 candidates. None of us dared to step forward so as not to look like interested parties. Then the lawyer decided to tell us how my grandfather had died. He said that after that, we would know who would get the ranch. The workers said that grandfather had woken up in a bad mood, and that he had mentioned that he could not sleep all night because he heard a woman calling him insistently. But when he came out of his room, there was no one there. After breakfast, the grandfather locked himself in his room and was not seen again. The workers said they had not checked on him because they thought he was asleep and did not want to disturb him. But when they went to look for him in his room, they did not find him. Immediately, everyone mobilized, and after a few minutes, they found him. He was dead, lying on the floor of the chapel he had. The workers believed that the shadows of the house had killed him, since, according to them, black silhouettes of people, evil silhouettes, appeared all over the ranch. Why did they think those things had killed him? It turns out that those who had found the body claimed that one of those silhouettes could be seen in the stained glass window. After hearing that, the 2 cousins who still had a choice rejected the ranch. They were very superstitious, so I kept it. It was made clear to all of us that grandfather had asked to be cremated and that he did not want a funeral. So we had to let our parents know in which cemetery his remains would be. My cousins said their goodbyes. I told everyone that they were more than welcome to come whenever they wanted to. Then everyone went home. The lawyer, after introducing me to the staff, asked me for the keys to my house so he could order the transfer of all my things. I sat in the dining room, not knowing exactly what to do. A day before, I had an office job, completely ordinary, and now I had a cook, cleaning, and maintenance staff for the ranch. Not so many people either. In total, there were 7 people. It was a very sudden change. One of the workers approached me and said he could give me a tour of the house. I insist. It was not a gigantic mansion, but it had 6 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, living room, dining room, kitchen, plus all the land outside. I spent the rest of the afternoon touring the place, thinking about what the lawyer had told us about how my grandfather had died. At nightfall, they asked me if I wanted to sleep in what had been my grandfather's room, and I said no, and asked them to please give me another one. Out of curiosity, I asked them where they lived, and they told me that, since my grandfather needed attention, he had built them some small houses on the edge of the ranch, so that they would have privacy, but would be close by for anything. But that every night they took turns having one of them stay in the house. That was fine. I didn't want to be all alone in an unfamiliar place so far away from everything. I thanked them for their attention and told them they could leave now. It was late. The person who stayed behind went to sleep downstairs. I wanted to take a bath before going to sleep, so I went to the bathroom, which was at the end of the hallway. I did my business, and as I went back to my room, I felt a shiver run down my back. I thought I saw one of the doors close quickly. I turned around with the intention of locking myself in the bathroom. At that moment, I heard the wood of the stairs creak. I shouted, asking who it was. At first I got no answer, but I insisted with my question. Then something answered me by emitting a grunt. I didn't hesitate any longer and locked myself in the bathroom. In less than a minute, someone knocked on the door. It was the worker who had stayed behind. He asked me why I had shouted. I told him what I had seen and heard. He took it calmly and suggested me not to pay too much attention to those things, as they happened so often. I calmed down and went back to the room, tried to sleep but could not. The sound of the cicadas and the wind hitting the tree branches kept me awake. I don't know at what moment sleep caught me, but the next thing I remember is that my grandfather's roosters woke me up. They were crowing animatedly. After breakfast, I asked to see the few animals on the ranch. Nothing too exotic, just what every ranch needs to sustain itself. At noon, I was craving for fruit, so I chose to go back to the house. While I was doing so, I felt as if someone was staring at me. I looked everywhere in a disguised way. I did not see anyone. Then it occurred to me to look up to the second floor, to my window, and there I could see a dark silhouette, as if it were the shadow of a person. I rushed into the house and told the first person I met that someone was in my room. The worker told me that this was not so, that no one was in my room, that, in any case, it was one of the dark silhouette. Evil shadows. Horror story. That made me really uncomfortable. Yes, I was scared, but I wasn't going to let a couple of weird things get the better of me. I couldn't bring myself to ask any more questions, out of fear, not for anything else. I finished my fruit and decided to go check my room. No one was there. At that moment, I clearly heard the voice of a couple of women. They were saying something, but I have no idea what it was. Then again, I saw one of the doors slam shut. That didn't make sense, because when I passed by the door was already closed, and at no time I heard it open. I decided to go check, full of nerves, of course. Inside the room, there was only a bed, an empty closet, and a table-like piece of furniture. I heard the women's voices again. It sounded closer, much closer, practically next to me. As I turned around, I saw that in one of the corners of the room, there were two black silhouettes. I ran out of shock, pushed the door, crashed against the wall in front of me, almost fell down the stairs, but I managed to brake and went down at a fast pace. I went to the kitchen and asked the worker if she had any idea what the shadows, the silhouettes might be. I told her what I had seen. She replied that when my grandfather bought the land and started remodeling and rebuilding after my grandmother's death, he came accompanied by a woman much younger than him, dangerously young. They were not a couple or anything. She seemed to be just another worker, his accountant or something like that. The point is that every night she would go into my grandfather's room and not come out until the next morning. One night, one of the workers heard my grandfather screaming. He sounded scared, so he ran to see what was going on. He forced the door and could see that the young girl was transformed into a horrible creature, a witch maybe. That worker always carried a gun and fired 3 shots at the thing. From that night on, the dark silhouettes began to appear. I didn't know what to say. I just kept silent for a few moments. Then I asked if blessed and was told no. I was told that it was not. That same afternoon, I sent for a priest to throw holy water all over the ranch. After that, I never saw anything strange again. I still live on the ranch, and to be honest, I like it here. Thank you for joining us for this spine-tingling story. We hope you found it both thrilling and thought-provoking. If you enjoyed this video, please consider participating in our channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing it with your friends. Your support goes a long way in helping us create more engaging content for you. Goodbye, and may you always tread carefully in the world of the unknown.